In this presentation today, we are going to go over GCSE history and hopefully help you to consider whether you might like to select it as a subject. History is a fascinating subject full of incredible stories. So what we're going to do is we're going to review some of the stories and maybe see to help you inform your choice, see if you find them a little bit interesting. As you know, in Year 9 you've been studying the Medicine Through Time content. But did you know in the 19th century, doctors encouraged young people to smoke, particularly those who suffered from asthma, and it wasn't really that long ago in the scope of history. Secondly, once we finish the Medicine Through Time content, we move on to Anglo-Saxon England and we look at William the Conqueror and how he was able to defeat Harold Godwinson at the Battle of Hastings, one of the most famous battles in history. What you might not know is that after his rule of around 20 years, he grew quite fat, and at his funeral, as they tried to put him in the coffin, his body actually burst, letting out a hideous smell in the cathedral, and history is full of gory, awful stories like that. Once you've looked at the Medicine Through Time content, and we've gone back in time to Anglo-Saxon England, we actually move forward in time. So if you're a modern historian, you might like a third story. We look at Nazi Germany and how Adolf Hitler came to power in the 20th century, which again in the scope of history isn't that long ago. Now this third image depicts a famous tapestry again, and it is from the Battle of Hastings, but the reason that I've included this in this PowerPoint is to explain that in the 1930s when Hitler came to power, he and the Nazis tried to steal this from the Louvre in Paris, one of the famous tapestries showing the links between different stories in history. And finally, when you've looked at the Medicine Through Time content, Anglo-Saxon England and Nazi Germany, we move on to our new unit in history, which is incredibly fascinating. And again, another modern historical topic. We look at the Cold War in the 1950s and 1960s, so your parents or grandparents might be able to remember this time in history. And this image shows young children in America practicing hiding under the desks because they're worried that they're going to be affected by a nuclear bomb. Again, something which is incredibly fascinating and not that long ago. So, if you found those stories interesting, we look at those and a lot more at GCSE history. You've studied history lower down in school, you have been studying the GCSE content this year, so hopefully it's given you an idea of the topics that we've studied so far and whether you think that this is the right course for you. Now certainly if you enjoy it, you're more likely to do well in a subject, and maybe you should choose history and take it for GCSE. A lot of people say to me, why choose history? It's about the past. But how can you move on to the future if you don't know where you came from? And here is an overview. They're the 4 units which I've just mentioned. And they help to kind of explain and look at all the different topics that we look at in history. We look at older events as well as more modern events too. But it's not just about studying in the past. History can help you in the present. It's a fascinating subject and it teaches you vital skills that future employers want. For example, you learn about people, how they interact, looking at different perspectives and interpretations, things that you'll have looked at lower down in the school. The motives and emotions that can tear people apart, and looking at how people interact is a really useful team building skill. In addition, you learn to locate and sift facts. In today's internet-based era where we're constantly bombarded by social media and information overload, history is significant because we can separate fact from fiction and help use our analytical skills to move forward. Finally, handling evidence to make informed decisions, to identify truth and recognise myth, propaganda and downright lies. So maybe if you're thinking about a career in journalism, that might be helpful too. But beyond that, there are also different skills which might help as well. Communicating your ideas and thoughts in a way that makes sense to others. And finally, possibly most importantly, learning about countries, societies and cultures. And as we've seen, we're going to look at different cultures. So if you've enjoyed studying history so far, it's definitely worth considering choosing history to study further in GCSE, and hopefully that's helped you think a little bit more and help it inform your future options. Thank you.